Understand this before anything else. The life you are living right now, in this very moment, is not happening to you. It is happening through you. Every circumstance, every bank balance, every closed door, and every open one is a mirror. And what that mirror is reflecting back to you is not your luck. It is not fate. It is not some cosmic lottery that some are born to win and others are born to lose. What that mirror is reflecting back to you is your consciousness. Nothing more. Nothing less. Think about this for a moment. You have spent years, maybe decades, looking at your outer world and trying to fix it from the outside. You have tried to change your bank account by working harder. You have tried to change your opportunities by networking more. You have tried to change your circumstances by pushing, straining, forcing, and hoping. And some of it has worked a little. But something in you knows, something deep in you has always known that there is a ceiling, an invisible ceiling that no amount of outer effort ever seems to break through. And that ceiling was never built by the world outside of you. Let that sink into your spirit. That ceiling was built inside your own mind long before you ever had the words to describe it. The truth is, abundance is not something you chase. Abundance is something you become. And once you become it, you stop chasing, because the thing you were chasing was never out there to begin with. It was always waiting inside of you, wearing the disguise of a feeling you had not yet allowed yourself to fully feel. You must realize that your imagination is not decoration. It is not a pleasant escape from a hard reality. Your imagination is the single most powerful faculty you possess. It is the workshop of God within you. Everything that has ever been built, every fortune ever made, every empire ever raised from nothing, began first as a picture held steadily in someone's mind, saturated with feeling, believed in before there was one shred of outer evidence to justify the belief. This is why the ancient wisdom keepers, the mystics, the prophets, the teachers who understood the deeper laws of being always pointed inward, not because the outer world does not matter, but because the outer world is always, without exception, downstream from the inner one. Consider this. Scripture tells us that the kingdom of God is within, not somewhere beyond the clouds, not in some far-off future reward for good behavior. Within, right now. Within your own consciousness lies a kingdom of infinite provision, infinite creativity, infinite supply. And the kingdom does not need to be built. It does not need to be earned through struggle. It only needs to be entered. And you enter it not through effort, but through assumption, through the simple, quiet, unshakable assumption that you already are the one who has what they desire. Let that settle within you. Assumption creates experience, not luck, not chance, not who you know or where you were born. Assumption, the state you assume and persist in feeling as true, will, sooner or later, harden into fact. This is not mysticism for its own sake. This is law, as consistent, as impartial, as unbending as gravity. And like gravity, it does not care whether you believe in it. It works regardless. The only question is whether you are using it consciously, deliberately, on purpose, or whether you are using it by accident, by default, through the unconscious assumptions you absorbed as a child and have never questioned since. Notice what happens when you examine your relationship with money honestly. Not the version you present to others, the private version, the one that whispers to you at 2 a.m. when the bills are on the table. What does that voice say? Does it say there is always enough, or does it say there is never enough? Does it say opportunity flows to me easily, or does it say I have to fight for every dollar I get? Feel this deeply, because this is the real diagnosis, not your outer circumstances, your inner narration. That narration, repeated silently thousands of times a day for years, has become the architect of the very life you now call your reality. Imagine for a moment a man walking through his days believing deep in his bones that he is fundamentally unlucky. He does not say this out loud. He may not even consciously think it, but it lives in him as a felt sense, a quiet undertone beneath every decision. He applies for the job, and somewhere inside he has already assumed rejection. He starts the business and somewhere inside he has already assumed failure. He meets the opportunity and somewhere inside he has already assumed it is not for him. And so again and again life obligingly arranges itself to match the assumption. Not because the universe is punishing him, but because consciousness always seeks its own level. The outer world is nothing but a faithful servant, bringing back to you the exact frequency you have been broadcasting, whether you meant to broadcast it or not. Now imagine a woman walking through those same days, facing the same bills, the same uncertain economy, the same ordinary human obstacles, but she carries within her an unshaken assumption of provision. She does not deny the bill on the table. She simply refuses to let that bill define what she believes about her future. She holds quietly and without announcing it to anyone the inner conviction that she is provided for, that doors open for her, that her needs are met, often in ways she could not have planned or predicted. This is not naive positive thinking. This is not pretending. This is a disciplined, deliberate occupation of a state of consciousness held steadily enough and felt deeply enough that it must, by law, begin to press itself into visible form. You are not your bank account. You are not your job title. You are not the number in your savings or the lack of one. You are not the family you were born into or the neighborhood that shaped your early assumptions about what was possible for someone like you. You are consciousness itself, wearing a temporary identity, and that identity can be revised at any moment you choose to revise it. This is the most liberating truth you will ever encounter, and it is also the most demanding because it removes every excuse. If your outer world is a reflection of your inner state, then you can no longer blame the mirror for what it shows you. You must instead turn your attention to the one standing in front of it. Understand this: self-concept precedes everything. Before you can have abundance, you must first become, in your own private sense of identity, someone to whom abundance naturally belongs. This is not about affirmations repeated mechanically while your heart still doubts every word. This is about a genuine shift in identity, felt from the inside, so that when you imagine yourself provided for, secure, free, resourced, it does not feel like fantasy. It feels like memory. It feels like coming home to something that was always true about you, buried beneath years of borrowed limitation. Let this sink into your spirit slowly. Every person you have ever admired for their wealth, their freedom, their ease with money did not begin by having those things and then feeling secure. They began by feeling secure by assuming the identity of one who has, and the having followed as a natural, almost inevitable consequence. The outer always follows the inner. It has never once in the history of consciousness worked the other way around. You do not wait to feel abundant until the money arrives. You allow yourself to feel abundant now, in this moment, with whatever you currently have, and that feeling becomes the very seed from which more abundance grows. This is why gratitude is not simply good manners toward the universe. Gratitude is a precise technology of consciousness. When you feel genuine gratitude for what you already have, however small it may appear, you are declaring to your own subconscious mind that lack is not your permanent condition. You are training your inner state to recognize abundance as familiar, as normal, as already belonging to you. And what your subconscious mind accepts as familiar, it will move heaven and earth through circumstance, through people, through timing that looks like coincidence but is not, to bring more of into your experience. Consider the biblical story of the loaves and the fishes, a crowd hungry, facing apparent scarcity, a small offering seemingly insufficient, and yet through an act of blessing, of gratitude spoken over what was already present, rather than despair over what seemed to be missing, the small became abundant, and there was more left over than there had been to begin with. This is not merely an ancient miracle to be admired from a distance. This is a pattern, a template, showing you exactly how consciousness operates. Bless what you have, however little it seems. Feel gratitude for it as though it were already enough, already more than enough, and watch how what you have begins quietly and steadily to multiply. Allow yourself to see money for what it truly is, not a moral reward for suffering, not evidence of worthiness or unworthiness. Money is simply a symbol, a physical representation of an inner state of value, exchange, and flow. When you constrict around money, gripping it with anxiety, resenting those who have more of it, believing deep down that wanting more of it makes you greedy or unspiritual, you are constricting the very channel through which it flows to you. But when you relax around it, when you see it as one expression among many of a universal abundance that is not limited, not scarce, not a finite pie with only so many slices, you open that same channel wide. The truth is, scarcity is a belief before it is ever a condition. There is enough. There has always been enough. The universe that spoke galaxies into being out of nothing, that scatters stars across a sky too vast for the mind to fully comprehend, is not suddenly incapable of providing for one single human life. The apparent scarcity you may be experiencing is not a reflection of the universe's limitation. It is a reflection of a limitation that was taught to you, absorbed by you, and until this moment never questioned by you. Feel this deeply. You are allowed to question it now. You are allowed to lay down the inherited belief that money is hard to come by, that you have to struggle for security, that people like you do not get to have what other people have. These beliefs were never yours to begin with. They were handed to you, often by people who loved you and were themselves simply repeating what had been handed to them. But a belief that was given to you can also be released by you. This is your inheritance to revise, not your sentence to serve. This is why the practice of revision matters so profoundly. At the end of each day before sleep takes you, you have the opportunity to review the events of that day, not as a passive spectator, but as a conscious editor of your own inner narrative. Where fear showed up, imagine confidence in its place. Where lack showed up, imagine provision in its place. Where you felt small, imagine yourself standing tall, secure, resourced. This is not delusion. This is reprogramming, deliberately and consciously, the subconscious mind that has been running your life largely on autopilot, based on scripts you did not choose and until now did not even know you were following. Understand this about the subconscious mind. It does not reason. It does not argue. It does not distinguish between what is vividly imagined and what is physically experienced. It simply accepts what is impressed upon it with feeling, and then it works tirelessly day and night to make that impression manifest in your outer conditions. This is why the feeling is so essential. Not the words alone, not the mental concept alone, the feeling. When you imagine yourself provided for, and you actually feel the relief, the ease, the quiet confidence of that provision as though it were happening right now, you are speaking directly to the subconscious in the only language it truly understands. Think about this for a moment. A child does not need to understand economics to feel safe when a parent says everything is going to be fine and means it, and the child feels the truth of it in their body. That felt sense of safety is what you must learn to generate for yourself deliberately, regardless of what the outer circumstances currently appear to say. Not by lying to yourself, not by denying what is in front of you, but by remembering again and again that what is in front of you right now is simply the outer evidence of a past assumption, and that a new assumption held now is already at work, quietly rearranging your future. You are not powerless in the face of your circumstances. You never were. You have simply been taught to believe you were, and that belief has been the actual chain, not the circumstances themselves. Circumstances are neutral. They only carry the weight and meaning that your inner state assigns to them. Two people can face an identical financial setback, and one will collapse into despair, cementing the very lack they fear, while the other will treat it as a temporary weather pattern passing through an otherwise abundant life, and will, often within a remarkably short time, watch new resources appear as if summoned. The difference between these two people was never the size of the setback. It was the state of consciousness each one carried into it. Let that sink into your spirit. Your outer world is always catching up to your inner world. There is always a lag, sometimes short, sometimes long, between the assumption you hold and its appearance in visible form. This lag is not evidence that the law is not working. It is simply the nature of growth. The same way a seed planted in soil does not become a tree overnight, though the entire tree is already latent within that seed from the very first moment. Your patience during this leg is itself an act of faith, and faith, understood correctly, is not blind hope. Faith is simply the settled, unshaken knowing that what has been assumed within must, in its own time and its own way, appear without. This is why anxiety about money is so counterproductive, not because anxiety is a moral failing, but because anxiety is itself a vivid act of imagination pointed in the wrong direction. When you lie awake worrying about a shortage, you are in that very moment imagining lack with tremendous feeling and detail. You are, without realizing it, doing the exact same technique that creates abundance, except you are aiming it at the very thing you do not want. This is not to shame you for your fear. Fear is human, and it will visit everyone at some point. But once you understand this law, you cannot use fear the same way again, because you now know that every anxious rehearsal of disaster is a request submitted to the same power that could just as easily be used to submit a request for provision. Notice what happens when you catch yourself mid-worry and gently, without force, without self-judgment, redirect your imagination toward the outcome you actually desire, not through gritted teeth, not through forced positivity, but through a soft, deliberate shift, the way you might gently turn a dial. Instead of imagining the bill unpaid, imagine the relief of it paid, and if you can, borrow the feeling of that relief right now before the fact, and let that feeling settle into your body as though it already belongs to you. This is the discipline of the awakened mind, not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear have the final word in your imagination. The truth is, you have been given dominion, not dominion over other people, not dominion in the sense of control or conquest, but dominion over your own inner kingdom, over the images you choose to dwell in, over the assumptions you choose to nourish with attention and feeling. This dominion was given to you at the very foundation of your being, and no outer circumstance, no economic downturn, no difficult childhood, no series of past failures can ever revoke it. It can be forgotten, it can be neglected, but it cannot be taken from you because it is not separate from you. It is what you are. You are not a victim of your financial history. You are not doomed to repeat the patterns of the family you were born into, unless you continue unconsciously to assume those patterns as your identity. You are at your core limitless creative consciousness, temporarily focused into a human experience, and that consciousness is not subject to the rules you were taught to believe about who gets to have wealth and who does not. Those rules were made up, every single one of them, made up by people, absorbed by other people, repeated for generations until they came to feel as solid and unquestionable as physical law. But they are not physical law, they are simply collective assumption, and collective assumption can be exited by any individual willing to do the inner work of exiting it. Allow yourself to see this clearly. Every wealthy person you admire was at some point simply a person who decided, consciously or not, to stop assuming lack and start assuming abundance, and who held that new assumption long enough and with enough feeling that it eventually hardened into fact. They were not smarter than you. They were not more deserving than you. In many cases, they were not even more skilled than you. What they had that made the difference was a different relationship with their own imagination and a willingness to occupy persistently the feeling of already having what they desired long before the outer world offered any proof that it was coming. This is your invitation now, not someday, not once things improve. Now, exactly as things are, you are invited to begin occupying a new state, not through grim determination, but through gentle, repeated practice. In the quiet moments of your day, in the space just before sleep, when the conscious, critical mind grows soft, and the subconscious becomes most receptive, you are invited to imagine your life as you wish it to be and to feel it, not as a wish but as a present fact. To walk through a single ordinary scene, the checking of a bank balance, the paying of a bill without a flicker of anxiety, the casual ease of choosing something you want without calculating and recalculating whether you can afford it, and to feel in your body the calm, quiet relief of that ease, as though you are already living it. Think about this for a moment. This is not childish fantasy. This is the exact method by which every enduring creation in human history first took root, in the imagination of someone who dared to feel it as real before the world agreed with them. The inventor felt the working machine before it worked. The builder felt the completed structure before a single brick was laid. And you, in your own quiet way, are invited to feel your own provision, your own security, your own abundance before the bank statement reflects it, because the bank statement was never going to be the cause. It was only ever going to be the evidence. Understand this and let it dissolve any lingering resentment you may carry toward those who seem to have more ease than you. Their ease is not a theft from your supply. Abundance is not a fixed pie with only so many pieces to go around. It is more like light, capable of illuminating an infinite number of rooms without ever growing dim in any one of them. Someone else's abundance does not subtract from yours. In fact, the more you can genuinely celebrate the prosperity of others without envy, without the quiet ache of comparison, the more you train your own consciousness to recognize abundance as normal, as available, as something that flows freely rather than something hoarded and scarce. This is why blessing others, even in small private ways, silently wishing them well as they pass, celebrating a friend's good fortune without a trace of bitterness, is itself a spiritual practice with tangible consequences. What you bless, you multiply in your own experience. What you resent, you constrict in your own experience. This is not superstition. This is the simple mechanics of a mind that is always, in every moment, either opening or closing around the truth of unlimited supply. Feel this deeply right now in this moment. You are provided for, not because your current circumstances necessarily prove it yet, but because provision is the very nature of the consciousness you are made of. The birds do not store anxiously against tomorrow, and yet they are fed, not because they work harder than you, but because they exist in unbroken alignment with the natural order of supply, without the interference of doubt, without the static of borrowed fear. You were never meant to carry the constant grinding anxiety about not enough. That anxiety is not your natural state. It is a learned deviation from your natural state, and it can, with patient practice, be unlearned. Consider this. Every night when you close your eyes, you have an opportunity most people never learn to use. In that drowsy state just before sleep, the analytical, doubting part of the mind grows quiet, and the deeper, more receptive part of the mind opens. This is fertile ground. This is the soil into which you can plant a new assumption. And because the ground is soft in this state, the planting goes deeper, takes root faster than anything you might try to force upon yourself during the harsh scrutiny of a wide-awake, doubting day. Use this time. Do not waste it on replaying the day's frustrations. Instead, gently guide your mind toward a brief scene, simple, believable, emotionally satisfying, that implies the abundance you desire, and rest in the feeling of it as you drift towards sleep. Let this settle within you. You are not trying to convince yourself of something false. You are remembering something true that has simply been buried beneath years of contrary conditioning. The abundance was never absent from your nature. Only your awareness of it was absent. And awareness, once reawakened, cannot be easily put back to sleep. Once you have truly felt, even once, the quiet, grounded knowing that you are provided for, that knowing becomes a reference point you can return to again and again whenever doubt tries to reassert its old authority over your mind. You must realize that this inner work is not separate from practical action in the world. It does not replace effort, wisdom, or diligence. Rather, it transforms the very quality of the effort you bring. Action taken from a state of fear is frantic, grasping, easily discouraged by setbacks. Action taken from a state of assumed abundance is calm, clear, resilient, able to see opportunity where fear would only see obstacle. The same hours of work, the same tasks performed yield entirely different fruit depending on the inner state from which they are performed. This is why two people can work equally hard and produce vastly different results. The labor was similar. The consciousness behind the labor was not. Imagine for a moment stepping fully into the identity of someone for whom ease with money is simply a fact of life, not a distant hope but a present reality, not arrogance, not excess, but a calm, grounded relationship with resources, an inner knowing that what is needed will be provided, that opportunities will present themselves at the right time, that you are not behind, not too late, not permanently locked out of the abundance that flows so easily to others. Wear this identity gently, the way you would wear a comfortable garment, not gripping it with desperate effort, but simply allowing it to settle over you again and again until it no longer feels like something you are pretending and begins to feel like something you simply are. This is the heart of true spiritual awakening around abundance. It is not about acquiring more things for the sake of having more things. It is about remembering your true relationship to supply, your true identity as an expression of a universe that has never once, in the story of creation, run out of what it needed to sustain the life within it. The same intelligence that turns soil and sunlight into fruit, that turns a single seed into a forest over generations, lives within you, and it is no less capable, no less generous in matters of your own provision. You are not asking too much when you desire financial ease. You're not being greedy when you desire freedom from the constant grinding worry about money. These desires are not flaws to be ashamed of. They are, in fact, whispers from your own deeper nature, reminding you that scarcity was never meant to be your permanent condition, that struggle was never meant to be the whole of your story. Allow yourself finally to want more without guilt, without apology, because in wanting more of what is good, you are simply aligning with the same expansive impulse that moves through every living thing, always growing, always reaching, always becoming more of what it was always meant to be. Consider too the quiet power of language, because the words you speak about your own life are never neutral. They are declarations spoken into the receptive field of your own subconscious, and repeated often enough they become instructions. When you say, "I never have enough," you are not describing your life. You are legislating it. When you say, "Money slips through my fingers," you are handing your own subconscious a script to perform faithfully without question. This is why the casual, offhand comments you make about your finances matter so much more than most people ever realize. The subconscious does not know the difference between a joke and a decree. It simply hears and it obeys. This is why you must begin gently and without self-criticism to notice the small sentences you speak about money throughout an ordinary day. Not to suppress them in a panic which would only add tension to the very area you are trying to heal, but to notice them the way a gardener notices weeds, calmly, without alarm, and to begin replacing them one at a time with language that reflects the truth you are choosing to grow instead. Not grandiose claims that your doubting mind will instantly reject, but simple, believable statements. I am learning to receive more easily. Money moves toward me in ways I do not always expect. I am building a new relationship with abundance. These small, honest shifts in language, repeated patiently over weeks and months, begin to retrain the deep grooves of thought that years of scarcity language carved into your mind. Think about this for a moment. A river does not carve a canyon in a single day. It is the patient, repeated flow of water moving the same direction day after day, year after year, that eventually reshapes solid rock. Your thoughts work the same way. A single positive thought about abundance will not undo years of scarcity conditioning overnight, and you should not expect it to, nor should you grow discouraged when old fear resurfaces after a moment of apparent progress. This is not failure. This is simply the nature of a mind being patiently reshaped, the same river cutting the same canyon, one gentle repeated flow at a time, until one day, almost without noticing exactly when it happened, you realize the old fear no longer visits you the way it once did. You are not required to feel triumphant every single day in order for this inner work to be effective. There will be days when doubt returns, when an unexpected bill arrives and old anxieties flare up as though no progress had ever been made at all. Do not mistake this for evidence that the law has failed you. It has not. Growth of this kind is rarely a straight line. It moves the way all living things move, in cycles, in seasons, with periods of visible progress followed by quieter periods where the work is happening beneath the surface, unseen, the way a seed does its most important work in complete darkness before the first green shoot ever breaks through the soil. Allow yourself then a deep and generous patience with your own becoming. You are not behind. You are not failing simply because your outer circumstances have not yet caught up to your inner revision. Remember the lag. Remember that what you are doing in these quiet moments of imagination and feeling is real work, even though it produces no immediate visible receipt. The farmer who plants in spring does not stand in the field demanding to see the harvest by evening. He trusts the process because he understands the nature of seeds, the nature of seasons, the nature of growth that cannot be rushed without being ruined. Extend that same trust to yourself now. Understand this also. Abundance, rightly understood, was never meant to be hoarded or clutched. The same law that brings supply to you flows most freely through those who understand that they are not the final destination of that supply, but simply one channel through which it moves, blessing others as it passes through their hands. This is not a contradiction of everything said before. It is its natural completion. As your own relationship with money heals, as scarcity gives way to a settled, grounded sense of provision, you will find a natural, unforced generosity beginning to rise within you, not from guilt, not from obligation, but from the simple overflow of a cup that has finally begun to feel full rather than empty. And in that generosity, freely given, the channel only widens further, because what you release with an open hand, trusting the same supply that filled you once will fill you again, rarely stays gone for long. Feel this deeply one more time before you carry this understanding back into your ordinary day. The circumstances in front of you right now, however they appear, are not a verdict. They are simply a report, an old report generated by assumptions you may no longer wish to hold. You are permitted, starting now, to revise the assumption, and in revising the assumption, to begin quietly, patiently, faithfully, the reshaping of the report that your life will generate next. This is not wishful thinking. It is the oldest and most reliable law you will ever learn to work with, written not in some distant scripture alone, but written into the very structure of a mind that creates, first in imagination and only afterward in form.